Recording is on.
Muy buenos días. Y bueno, ya casi tardes. En esta ocasión, pues tenemos ya nuestra conferencia magistral para la clausura del evento y está con nosotros precisamente el doctor Alon Gelbman y con un título precisamente de su trabajo que tiene que ver con las fronteras y el turismo, desde la parte global, desde esta emergencia que estamos viviendo y claro está con esas oportunidades que tenemos y esos retos hacia el futuro. El doctor Alon Gelbman es precisamente profesor de muchos años, eh, tiene que ver precisamente con el ámbito del turismo. Actualmente es el jefe del área del Departamento de Turismo de Hotelería y Administración de Kinner College of the Sea of Galilee en Israel. De tal manera que le damos las gracias de estar aquí con nosotros. Y bien, pues, Alon, it's all for you. This presentation, you are in the University of Ciudad Juárez. This is your home, so please give me
Thank
your...
you. Thank you so much, Thomas, and thank you very much for the organizer to invite me for giving this important presentation. It is a pleasure to meet you all from Israel and to speak about tourism and borders in the face of global emergency. I want to start my presentation with this question about the relationships between borders and tourism. And the question is, what makes borders to become tourist attractions? So different scholars mention that many people, especially tourists, have fascination with borders. Timothy, in 2001, described the borderlines as a fabrication of human reflections of socio-political values. In the picture, in this slide, you can see this couple overlooking. This is a picture which was taken in Israel on the Golan Heights in the north of Israel, very near to the border between Israel and Syria. Actually, it's a very close and very fortified border. And this couple is standing here in this point and overlooking to the other side of the border and talking about what they see there. So, borders and tourism. Political boundaries function as physical and psychological barrier for interaction between neighboring countries. And governments delimit national territories in order to control movement of people, goods, and services between countries. So there are several pictures which are good examples about how governments are doing these limitations using passports, visa, different coins when you cross the border from one country to the other country. And sometimes to some of the countries you are visited as a tourist, you must have a visa. Sometimes you have to come with the visa to get the visa before. Sometimes you get the visa on the border. And today, in the age of COVID-19 and epidemic problems, probably we will soon, everybody, all the tourists will need to have to bring with them the vaccine certification. With hopefully soon we will have a vaccine for COVID-19, and this might be so helpful for us to get back to be real tourists like we used to be until a couple of weeks before. So these are very good examples for how governments all over the world are controlling and managing administratively the border passage. In this model, you can see actually a kind of typology of what makes different borders around the globe, or what attract tourists to visit the border in all over the globe in different places. Sometimes it's the subject of the border. I will shortly give you some examples for that. Sometimes it's the location or the environment of the border, or it can be also the development that created by people around the border. In many cases, there will be a combination. So in some borders attractions, tourism border attractions, we can see a combination between the subject, the location, the development. Sometimes it's two of them, sometimes it's all of them. In this model that myself and Professor Dallin Timothy developed a few years ago, we described all the combinations and all the possibilities that makes borders attractive for tourists. I want to give you some examples. So, for instance, some of you probably familiar with this case study from the USA. So this very famous place, very known with the name of Four Corners Monument. It's in the middle, actually it's in the middle of the desert. And this is a border between 4 states of USA, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. And someone decided to sign it on ground, and actually to create a monument. This monument created specially for the tourists, for visitors. And actually, at the moment they created this monument, this place started to be a tourist attraction, very famous and very familiar one. And people are driving hundreds of kilometers, especially to come here and to visit, for instance, like you can see in this image, visiting 4 countries, 4 states in the same time. If you Google Four Corners, you will find plenty of images and pictures that people took in very special ways to show the special experience they have here, the father and the son together in the 4 countries, and many other interesting images that people are taking. Another example is the Great Wall in China, one of the most famous attractions, heritage attraction actually, or border heritage attraction. Actually, millions and millions of visitors are coming there every year. It's very crowded, as you can see in the image. It's sometimes not a big pleasure to climb in the wall with so many people together. It's it's UNESCO World War Heritage site, and it's amazing, it's a heritage, amazing experience to climb and think about how it was designed so many years ago. And when the rain starts and people want to go back, it becomes even harder to travel there. That's what happened in the day I was visiting there a few years ago. Very interesting, very exciting. So let's say a few words about the relationships between borders and globalization. So the age of globalization has actually create a lot of changing with the relationship of countries, governments policies, and borders. So border become much more open. for goods, for many things, but also, of course, for people passage and for tourists which want to travel and visit other countries. So when we are talking about those special relationships between borders and globalization, we are talking about, for instance, supranationalism, those agreements, special agreements, regional agreements like EU in Europe or like NAFTA. And those agreements actually, they are they are canceling also the physical, both the physical and the administrative borders that tourists might have. For instance, in Europe today, if you go to visit Europe, if you come from Mexico or from Israel, from out of Europe, you will need to do a border control only one time when you get inside to Europe. If you came to France, you will do the border control only in France. And later on, you can cross the borders from inside Europe freely without any border passage or any barrier or any problem. So this is the big advantage of globalization, because globalization makes the tourist life very accessible. They can visit more places without any, they don't need visas, they don't need even passport control, and it becomes very, very easy to do. So this is also one example. You can even land in an airport in one country, like I did in this case in Slovakia, and I crossed in Austria in Vienna, and then I just crossed by car the border. I took a car and I drive very near, only 1 hour to another country, to Slovakia, neighboring country. So Europe became very open, and it's so easy to visit. But in the other side, we have also the opposite example. Let's call it Balkanization. Balkanization is an example of another phenomenon, which is just the opposite from globalization, because in globalization, we are talking about openness of the borders, but in Balkanization, we are talking about places that used to have a very open and free border passage between the neighboring countries, and nowadays they have border control, they are managing the border crossing, and this is the example of the Balkan countries. Used to be one big country, former Yugoslavia. Nowadays there are 7 independent countries, and when you are passing as a tourist from each one of them to the other neighboring countries, you will always have to have a border control, and you will be checked. You will have to present your passport, etc., etc. So this is also amazing. In the picture here, you can see one example, border crossing between Croatia and Montenegro. Okay? Also, this is another example of Balkanization, not in the Balkans, but a few years ago when many refugees escaped from Syria and came to Europe through Turkey, the Hungarian government decided to close hermetically the borders and didn't let them get in. And you can see the picture here, which describes this phenomenon. I can also mention, of course, the very, very actual example that we have nowadays, that following the epidemic and the COVID-19 crisis, a lot of countries, actually all of the countries, are closing the borders and managing them very carefully. In Israel, the government closed the airport, and only very, very few flights can come in or go out. And this is the same in many other places, at least for a couple of weeks or couple of months, that the accessibility to the country is not available. Very interesting example is here in the borders between Norway and Russia. In the Norwegian side, you will not see a lot of army or a lot of security activity, but if you cross to the Russian side, you will see a lot of them. And this is really amazing to watch and see. And then another example from the border of Canada and USA, between Canada and the north, in the 49th parallel, northwest of the northwest border between both countries, you can see also the post-September 11 security agenda, which become very strict and very important. But also in this specific border, you will have another phenomenon. Here you can see a few pictures from this border. This is from the United States side. If you follow these stones here, you don't see a fence. It's just few stones. So maybe someone might think that it's possible to cross the border freely, but not. You can see the sign. It's forbidden to cross. And both sides, the American and the Canada, is watching very carefully the borderline here. A lot of cameras, a lot of security systems. I will show you them here, like this camera here, and even some cameras in the ground, hidden cameras in the ground. But here I have a very special story to you, a very unusual example, because this man here, he was opening a guest house for tourists. And the name of the guest house is Smuggler Inn Guest House, because during the night, a lot of evening or a lot of nights, things happens around the border. People are trying to smuggle, mostly drugs, but also other things. And police are using helicopters and patrols to run after the smugglers. So a lot of action and activity around. So this is a kind of a dark tourism attraction, because you are invited to take a room here. And during the night, you can sit in the balcony and follow after the activity, the action. So for those travelers who love action and activity and adrenaline in the blood, they will be able to pay money and stay overnight here and have this special experience. So this is also a very strange example of border tourism attractions. So actually, many features like flags, like signs, like special border buildings, in many cases even historical buildings or heritage buildings, might be an attraction for the tourists, and they would love to take picture, which will be fascinating for the tourist experience of them. Okay, so I would like to focus in the rest of the time of my presentation. I would like to focus on three main and interesting types or case studies for tourism attractions, border tourism attractions as a space of presenting and symbolizing peace. Okay? And here are the name of these three types. And shortly I will start to speak about each one of them, give you some example from different places around the globe, and then I would be able to summarize with the theory about it. Okay, so I will talk about one-side border tourism attraction. Secondly, I will talk about, this will be type B. One-side border attraction will be type A, and formally closed and fortified borders will be type B. And then type C will be trans-border peace parks. So let's start. Let's start from the type A, one-side border tourism attractions. If you follow after the figure, you can see that this type of borders are typical for places, the same like I mentioned, if you remember in the beginning of the lecture, I mentioned the Israeli and Syrian border. It's a war border. There is no peace agreement. It's forbidden. It's impossible, actually. It's even dangerous to cross. And each one of the countries, in both sides, the Israeli side and the Syrian side, they are having a heavy army forces around these borders, and a lot of course, security systems. So actually, what tourists can do, they can come near to the border, and they can look at the other side of the border. In some places, there are special attractions for the tourists to come, especially in places that the tourists can overlook to the other side of the border. They can come, they can listen to the guides to learn about the political or the history or whatever happened around. They can see the real places, and I will give you some examples how it works. In this model, you can see some of the important terms or the important phenomena which might make this kind of border interesting. So we can talk about historical knowledge, we can talk about memory, maybe memory of the wars which used to be here. So we can talk about also dark tourism. Sometimes the memory is collective memory, sometimes it's individual. If people have any individual connection to what happened around this border. And there is a lot of symbolicity which can make the place a tourist attraction. I will show you shortly some of the examples how it works on ground. So for those who are not familiar with Israel, this is the map. It's a very small country, only 400 kilometers length from north to south. And I'm talking about this border here, Syria and Israel in the north, east-north border of Israel and Syria. And I will talk shortly about this model I developed a few years ago in one of my studies. The name of the model is Fear and Hope. And actually, to make the long story short, I will say that visitors, tourists which are visiting one-side border tourism attraction, like the border between Israel and Syria, or the border between North and South Korea, places around the globe which are still suffering from serious political problems. So they might experience both, hoping for better future, for peace in the future, for better situation around the border, but also fear fear because the dark history of the place, fear because the wars, fears because the situation today, the danger around the place. So I'm coming back to the picture of this couple from the beginning. So you can see here, you can see better here this picture. So if they are feeling that they are observing the enemy, so back to the model, so they are experiencing kind of a fear, kind of hard feeling about soldiers which died here in this, especially in this place used to be a very, very hard battles between the armies of both countries. But maybe they can also think about the hope for better future, or better situation in the future between both countries. So this is this model of fear and hope together, mixture of fear and hope together. So this place actually transformed to be a tourist attraction. So if a bunker, this is actually a bunker. So the bunker is a symbol of war, a symbol of actually tragedy, a very dark history. But if this bunker become places the tourists are able to visit, maybe it's a good sign. Maybe tourists can feel even some hope for a better future, and they can think about places around over the border in the neighboring countries, because from this place, we call it Bental Mountain, you can observe not only Syria, also Jordan. With Jordan, we already have a peace agreement, but also Lebanon, which we don't have peace agreement yet. So there is a lot of mixture of experiences during while visiting this very interesting tourist attraction. So you can see, you can even get inside to the one of those bunkers, places that soldiers used to look or shoot, and you can look at the other side, the Syrian side of the border. Here you can see the United Nations camp in the land of in between both countries. And children can play. So this is maybe a positive sign. Or some of the tools that used to be weapon nowadays are using to be an art pieces. So also we can think both sides of fear and hope model. Tank is not actually it's not only it's not useful anymore. It's now just place of memories. So these are the things that I wanted to present about Type A, the one-side border tourism attraction. And now let's go to the second, the Type B tourism attraction around the border. And actually, we are going to talk about formally closed and fortified borders, which transferred to tourism attractions as a space of presenting and symbolizing peace. Okay? So actually, in the past, those places used to be very close, very fortified, but nowadays, they are absolutely open. There are not barriers. In many cases, you don't need even a visa or nothing. You can come and visit, and now it's very free. Okay? So the most famous or most important and for sure famous example is the transformation of Berlin Wall in Germany. Actually, the fall of the Berlin Wall was a huge symbol, not only for Germany, actually for all Europe, because it symbolized the fall of the fence between East Europe and West Europe, and it's a very important event. Okay, so the tourists which came to visit Berlin, they asked, where is the wall? But in most cases, there are not wall anymore, because the people, they just destroyed the wall, because it was part of the action of physically destroying the wall. They didn't want to see the wall anymore. But for the tourist, it was very important to see pieces of this wall, because this wall is so important. By the way, the wall was there between 1961 to 1981 for 20 years. So they started to sign. If you see here in the middle of the road, they started to sign the places that the wall used to pass in the middle of the streets, the wall, especially for the tourists. Also, they started to use these pieces, remains of the wall in many places around Berlin, also with the graffitis, the famous graffiti, especially for the tourist. I would say that Berlin Wall is the attraction number one, the most important attraction for travelers which are coming to Berlin, will be the wall, okay, the Berlin Wall. The Checkpoint Charlie Museum is telling the story of the 20 years of wall and all what happened when people tried to escape from the west side of the wall from the east side of the wall to the west side of them. And nowadays, the Checkpoint Charlie, which is the border passage, is not existing anymore, but it is existing, not as places to control the passage, but for the tourist. Actually, it's directed. The soldier that you see here is not a real soldier; it's an actor, and the uniform actually is for the tourists. To give them the experience of the place, to take picture. Actually, it's a tourism business. So people are coming and enjoying the border. The best souvenir from Berlin will be to buy a small piece of stone that remain from the border. So if you buy a small piece, you will pay for it €5. If you buy a bigger one, you will pay more. And if you want a stamp, you can get that for as a souvenir. You need to pay for it, of course. And this gentleman here, of course, is not a real soldier. Is that just an actor that doing tourism business and selling souvenirs and selling stamps for the tourists. Even the tourists which are taking picture here, and those who want to take a picture with the soldier and the flag and the Checkpoint Charlie passage, they need to pay for it. So this is the way we can do business. We can do business around the border tourism attractions in those places. Very interesting and very exciting. And Checkpoint Charlie Museum is very interesting museum that you can learn a lot about the story of the border here along 20 years and the relationship between Eastern Europe and Western Europe, and when Germany used to be divided country, and Berlin used to be divided city. Very interesting story. For instance, this is one of the things that you can see inside the museum. This Volkswagen, they people try to escape from the eastern side, and they try to hide them inside the baggage of the Volkswagen. So it's really to give the tourist the experience of what happened here, the heritage of this border. Also, another example that I want to mention shortly is the Golden Triangle in Southeast Asia, northern Thailand, eastern Myanmar, and western Laos. Used to be in the past a very close and very fortified border. Actually, for many years it used for opium gangsters that used to grow the opium there and sell it all over the world. But later on, the countries fight against the opium gangsters, and they succeed to win it. And nowadays they are not growing opium anymore in this region. Only if it's controlled, and only if it's for medical use, not for smokers. And but they took this interest region and they transferred it to be a very important tourism attraction. And this place, millions of visitors are coming to visit the Golden Triangle. They learn about the past of the region, and they are enjoying the possibility to cross the borders and to visit, and maybe to even to sail along the river, the Mekong River. Very interesting, very fascinating tourist attraction. Here you can see the Opium Museum. It's also one of those special attractions developed around the border. This is inside the museum. You can see to picture Opium King or Freedom Fighter, which are the generals, one of the famous generals which fight against the Opium Kings. Very nice picture from this border. And now let's talk shortly about Type C, Transborder Peace Parks, as a space of presenting and symbolizing peace. So actually, the first peace park established in the world this is a very famous one, the Waterton Glacier International Peace Park between USA, United States, and Canada. This is a picture from there. And the idea is to symbolize the very good relationship between both countries. And actually, the idea in peace parks that there are no fences, there are no border control. In most cases, we are talking about environmental region, which nature resources, which both countries are managing together, and the tourists can enjoy it together without worrying about any border control. In Africa, for instance, in peace parks, one of the ideas is to keep the track of the animals, the wild animals, free. For instance, the elephants. Okay, so inside the peace park there are several monuments for visitors, a lot of trekking possibilities, and you can see it's in the middle of the forest. So one side is the USA side, and the other side is the Canadian side. So I just want to conclude shortly conclusions of the main idea about the three types of tourism and borders attractions that I focused about, and how they connected also to experience and the message of a piece. So when we mentioned the one-side border tourism attractions, it's very interesting because even that the border is very close, and even that it's impossible to cross it to the other side because it's not a peace border and there is still tension and army in both sides, still I think I showed you that the tourists can have an interesting experience of overlooking to the other side, learning about it, thinking about better future. So there is this mixture between fear and hope together. In the second type B, we saw the opposite example. We saw the positive example when borders used to be closed and fortified, but nowadays they are absolutely open, like in Berlin, like nowadays between East Europe and West Europe, okay? And then also tourists can learn a lot about the heritage, the dark heritage, but they can enjoy from the peace, the present peace around the border today. And the last, the type C example, actually, it's very interesting because the idea is also sustainability and keeping the environment together, managing the environment together, but also it's a symbol for a good relationship between bordering countries. But sometimes, if the past of the countries was a dark one, wars and problems, we can see it in many places in Africa, for instance. So the idea of trans-borders peace pacts is also to strengthen the peace relationships and to invite the visitors, invite the tourists to spend the border, to spend both sides of the borders, cross freely inside the peace pact, and feel that they are very better present and hopes for better future for the border region. Thank you very much for listening to me. It was really a nice experience and very exciting for me, and I will be very happy to answer on any questions you have about the presentation. Thank you so much.